a tight little bow that is then the answer for every single exchange. All up into a tight little bow that is then the answer for every single exchange. It completely obscures all of that. All up into a tight little bow. It completely obscures all of that. It completely obscures all of that. Obscures all of that. Tight little bow is then the answer. Is then the answer.
He talks about the commodity as being like a bounding and theological nicety. Bounding and theological nicety.
Is then the answer. The mysterious character of the commodity form of men's own labor as objective characteristics of the products of labor themselves. Men's own labor is then the answer. Men's own labor. Tight little bow.
He talks about the commodity as being like a bounding and theological nicety.
Of the products of labor themselves. Men's own labor of the products of labor themselves.
Falls out of its wooden brain, grotesque ideas, far more wonderful than if it were to begin dancing of its own rope. Dancing of its own rope. Falls out of its wooden brain, grotesque ideas. Grotesque ideas.
Is then the answer.
Grotesque ideas. Dancing of its own rope.
It completely obscures all of that.
Dancing of its own rope. Its own rope. Its own rope. Generalized commodity production spontaneously generates false ideas about the world. False ideas about the world. Bounding theological nicety.
Is then the answer.
False ideas about the world. In that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same. Is that one benefits and one suffers. One benefits and one suffers from that. In that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same. Suffer from the same. Suffer from the same. Generalized commodity production spontaneously generates false ideas about the world, and that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusion. False ideas about the world, same delusion.
Men's own labor.
And that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusion. One benefits and one suffers.
Men's own labor.
One benefits and one suffers.
Men's own labor.
One benefits and one suffers. One benefits and one suffers.
Men's own labor. obscures all of that.
Dancing of its own free will, its own free will, its own free will. Generalized commodity production spontaneously generates false ideas about the world. False ideas about the world. Grounding in theological nicety
Is then the answer.
false ideas about the world. And that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusions. It's just that one benefits and one suffers. And that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusion. Suffer from the same delusion. Suffer from the same delusion. Generalized commodity production spontaneously generates false ideas about the world. And that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusion. False ideas about the world. Same delusion. Same delusion.
Men's own labor.
And that they all, to some extent, suffer from the same delusion. One benefits and one suffers from it. One benefits and one suffers from it.
Men's own labor.
One benefits and one suffers from it.
Men's own labor.
One benefits and one suffers from it.
That was a great performance.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear you like making your own music. And I guess like one of my first questions was just like, you know, you're a multi-instrumentalist, but you also are working a lot with electronics, which I feel like is an instrument in itself. And you really melded the worlds of like acoustic and electronic in your performance. Mm-hmm. I guess, do you think of it like separate like that?
I used to, but I think it's actually, I'm trying to think of like when was, so like in college, I think when I started playing like classical saxophone,
Mm-hmm.
I started playing pieces by this composer, Luciano Berio. And this like one specific piece called, or like pieces called sequenza, like different sequenza number 1 through like 9 or something, or 12. And my teacher just kind of like gave them to me, and he was like, "Here, work on this." And I was like, "Cool." And then I started playing it, and I was like, "This is awesome. This is crazy." And I realized like whenever I tried to like look up a recording of it, I was like, oh, this is all like originally like electronic music, like transcribed for woodwinds. So yeah, which was wild to me. But so yeah, then that's kind of like what got me into like sound synthesis and wanting to like do that with my saxophone. When I picked up guitar too, I was like playing with my pedals, playing with my synth, and like doing it through guitar. And I was like, wow, well, I like the guitar, but I like the saxophone better than the guitar.
Yeah, sure.
I like playing the saxophone better than the guitar. But so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And luckily, my last year of undergrad, my school started putting together like a sound synthesis and like electronic music program. So I took a few courses at school, which I feel really lucky to have been able to do. So that's kind of like what got me into this.
Oh, wow. What did you like learn in those classes?
Just like from square one, like here's a sine wave, and like
Yeah.
here's how this sound is produced, like here's what an oscillator is, and then it was like an Ableton-based class, so learned everything through Ableton, then started getting into, my teacher had like this really old, I don't remember what kind it is, but he had a really old analog synth in his office that he would let me like play around with when he wasn't there. So Yeah.
And then you felt like it kind of complemented saxophone, or it was like a similar vehicle for expression?
Kind of, yeah, like both of those things.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are parts of like this set where I like want the saxophone to be like totally unprocessed. Because I think the like specific synth sounds and like just saxophone with all the overtones and everything like create these really cool dissonances together that I really like. So, yeah.
No, yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that's why I really liked your set, was because you couldn't really tell, like, from just, if you're just listening, like, what was coming from where. It was all, like, one sound, even though there's, like, all these different elements. And I feel like that's really hard to do, because it can sound like a bunch of different things are happening at once, but this was, like, a whole ensemble of music. I feel like that's hard to pull off.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So you've been doing this, I guess, for, like, past 7 years or something like that?
Well, I really this has been kind of like a just at home thing for, I'd say, since like the start of the pandemic.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, I'd say like pre 2020, I was pretty busy with a lot of like groups and writing music for groups, like purely acoustic music. And then once everything kind of settled down, not settled down, but you know, once everybody had a lot of alone time, I kind of took that time to try and finally do this, because I've been wanting to do it for years. Yeah, and it's just kind of been building from there. It started with just improvising, and then it kind of grew into, I don't want to say a coping mechanism, because that's like too extreme, but it grew into like, if I had a hard day at work, especially like working, it's comforting, like working in, I was working in food service for most of the pandemic, and like, that was very stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, working in food service is stressful, not in a pandemic, but yeah, it was really stressful, and I kind of like took this as a way to, it was a very like me time thing, that didn't have to do really with like super regimented practicing routines. And I would just like come home and be like, cool, I got all my stuff, I'm just gonna let it roll.
Yeah, no, that's like a really important thing. I feel like we can get bogged down sometimes as musicians or artists of like trying to plan it, be really regimented, and to just feel like fully free. Like, and you were just like learning it. I think that's a way to approach music, no matter like where you are.
Yeah.
So that's pretty inspiring.
I feel like most of the way I learned this was just like sitting in like drone land forever, because I would like come up with a thing, and it would just be going and going and going and going, and like while that thing was like going in the background, I would just be like looking at this thing like, oh, like,
Yeah.
how can I make it do this? How can I make it do this? And like meanwhile, I'm just like in this like I don't know. It was just kind of letting everything go at like the same time, and it became like very meditative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, can you tell me about the piece that you just performed?
Oh, maybe.
If your mic doesn't break. Got it.
I'm just gonna put this right in my
Yeah,
pocket.
that's
Maybe. Okay. Cool. Good. Cool. So yeah, these 3 pieces actually. It was 3 shorter pieces with like a little interlude in between.
Okay.
And I kind of wrote them in congruence with like working this at this cafe that me and a few others unionized, and just kind of the process of that process, and like the kind of struggles of like working in West Loop, which is a very like wealthy, high energy what's the word I'm thinking of? I don't know, like emotionally desert. Desert, yeah.
Desert.
The desert,
Yeah,
desert,
yeah.
whatever.
Emotional desert.
I'm just
That
thinking
could be
about
the name
dessert.
of your song.
Emotional desert. But yeah, so these, should I explain the songs?
Yeah, please,
Okay.
if you want.
Yeah, it might get a little heavy, but, you know, that's my warning, but my trigger warning. But that first song is unofficially titled Crying in the Bathroom.
Yeah.
As many of us do at work when we're stressed out and overwhelmed. At this crazy job, busy all the time, having big bosses, when you come out as like, hey, we're a union, they're like trying to do everything to squash you.
Yeah.
So, naturally, a lot of us cried in the bathroom a lot. And while I was crying in the bathroom, there'd be a lot of times where I was like, oh my God, I'm having such a bad time, but like it sounds so cool in here. when I cry in the bathroom. And at the time, I was also reading Wage, Labor, and Capital by Karl Marx, and he like sprinkles in all these paragraphs where he describes like he's like describing this like obviously the brutal way that this country and other country treats the workers and how they should be liberated, but then he like sprinkles in these little paragraphs of like work can be or could be so beautiful, and we could all have it be such a like beautiful and like even nurturing part of our lives. And that resonated with me a lot, and I took it in a way as like, well, that's kind of like not how it is right now, but my own way of that is like finding like beautiful sounds in the workplace. And like even if I'm crying in the bathroom, I'm like, wow, like I'm crying, but the acoustics in here are so good. So throughout that like first piece, there was actually the first sound you heard was a little snippet of me crying in the bathroom.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
And there were like 2 little snippets of that. Second piece was just a little fun interlude thing that I liked. Third piece, I wrote after I had a pretty heavy experience at my cafe that unfortunately pushed me to have to say goodbye to that job. But I wrote it after a person outside of a cafe had passed away, presumably part of the houseless community, but a customer had come in and told me and my coworker that like, oh, there's somebody across the street, doesn't look so great, doesn't look like he's doing so great. And so we're kind of like, okay, like weird that you would ask us to do something about it as cafe workers, but so yeah, we went and checked on him, and it didn't look like anything was happening. So call 911, all of that. But I mean, the very obviously sad part of that aside, it made me really think like how somebody of very high privilege thinks that they can just kind of like put like the responsibility of being like a good civilian onto a service worker who they think, can do everything for them.
Yeah, like they couldn't even do it themselves.
Yeah.
Or try to like help out. They just assume that you're working for them, basically.
Mm-hmm. in every possible way.
Yeah.
And so that piece was, I went home and I thought about staying my shift, and I was like in the middle of that thought, I was like, what am I becoming? I need to go home. But so I went home, and I just wanted to play bass clarinet and make some pretty sounds and write a song for this person that I don't know, that I didn't know. But anyway.
Oh, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really horrible. And I'm sorry you had to experience that. And I think
it's okay. I mean, I'm glad that me and my coworker were there.
Yeah.
To say the least. But the third song was about, I've been reading, me and a few of my friends have been undertaking the reading Capital by Karl Marx, trying to get through it. It's a book, 3 volumes like that.
Yeah.
Thick, a critique of capital.
Yeah, I've only got through a few pages.
Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna hold this. I'm just gonna hold it. But we got to, had been recording our conversations, and we got to this part, we got to the part 4 of chapter 1, I think, which is like fetishizing the commodity.
Yeah.
Which I think actually doesn't mean like literally fetishizing the commodity, but it means like the commodity as a religion almost, or like as a way of living your life. And as I was recording conversation and like listening back to it, I was like, what if I kind of satirically like put in the background like a hymn type chorusy, churchy little song behind it. So that was just kind of me being silly and sarcastic, but yeah.
I know, I think that it's more than just silly. I don't know, I feel like there's actually like a meaning behind it, and like all of the, I feel like through line through all your pieces is just like a deep care for yourself and your community and like what you're doing, and it like really comes out in your music. And I think that it's important to like, just the fact that you like, like we're sampling the voices of your reading group. And I don't know, I think just...
With their permission.
Yeah.
I asked them, don't worry.
Yeah, and it's like, what does that mean in today's world too? And it's like, it's kind of cool because there wasn't recording capabilities when that was written, really. So I wonder what Marx would have thought of that today. But it's like, it's cool to think though, it's like, we're still in dialogue with that. And it's cool to see that you're in dialogue with that like 200 years plus later, maybe, because it's still changing, and it's like our conditions have changed but not changed at all. So it's like, I don't know, it's cool to like have the dialogue. I feel like the representation of your acoustic instruments and the digital, it's like bringing those like older thoughts, like the newer thoughts, but like, making them together, like in dialogue with itself.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's what it's all about. It's like being in conversation with like the history, but then also the present day. I guess that kind of could lead into like conversation too. I mean, I feel like with saxophone too, and especially you coming from like a jazz background, like that's kind of a similar thing, It's like we're in conversation. It's like it's really deep history, but then it's also like, well, what does it mean today to like play jazz music or whatever you want to like call it, Black American music? Because it's like it's this constant dialogue. Like you can't forget like the elders and the people from before and like what they had to say. But then you also like can't be stuck in the past.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like you navigate that? And do you feel like it connects too to like your readings like of Marx too? Like have you like, you know what I mean?
Are you asking like?
I mean, do you feel like those connect, like those same ideas connect for you? Like you're like for like history and, you're reading something that's older and you listen to music that's older, but you also listen to like you're making new music. So like how are you in dialogue with all those things?
I think a lot of my early influences do actually like come out in this. Like when I was younger, I was like many students of jazz and saxophone players, specifically obsessed with John Coltrane. And always trying to attain this like beautiful, warm, overtony, sometimes really like sharp and crispy sound in like every single thing that I do, not just saxophone, with like synthesizer, with groups that I write for, with singing sometimes. So yeah, definitely very important to me to like keep that language in everything I do. And like same with marks, you know, I like to try to you know, it's like I'm recording my friends and I want them to like be here with me almost. I mean, they unfortunately couldn't make it today, but I'm like,
yeah,
I like and like my little samples too, like there were a few samples of like me like cooking in the kitchen that were, you know, very obscured by like other sound synthesis, but just kind of that incorporation of having other people with me, having like every little thing that I do in my life that like is mundane or could tire me out, like just like be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, I feel like it's kind of no, totally. I think too, like it makes me realize too, it's like you're not just like in dialogue with like the past or your community, but with yourself. You know, and I feel like all of those together is like why music is so powerful. And like as you're growing as a person and as an artist, your music is also changing, you know? And I think like when you're talking about like John Coltrane, like he's a perfect example of that. Like his music is in dialogue with his music. You know, it's like it's changed so much in his like very short like lifetime. And I think it's like, yeah, and it's like you're connecting to like other people and other ideas, but you're also like connecting with yourself and then reflecting on that and like how you grow. I mean, it's like from the pandemic, it's been, you know, like 3 years and everything is different now. And, you know, that's, so like since you started playing, it's a lot different.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess like some other questions I was gonna ask you about is that, so if you guys don't know, Sarah is in a lot of bands and plays a lot of instruments very well, but, you know, primarily a saxophonist and great composer as well. And it's true. And yeah, like how do you navigate between those different worlds of different styles and different communities? And I feel like everything you do is super genuine. And I like, you know, and I think that's like, I very much like admire that. Like you're not like tied down to like a style or something.
Yeah.
So how have you like navigated all of those things, like playing in really different types of bands and different instruments and like going between those worlds?
It's I kind of just have to like I really want to do a lot of things. Like growing up as like a jazz player, I still want to play jazz. Like I still want to play in like a jazz quartet, a jazz trio. But I have all these things that like I still really, really want to do. Like I want to do sound synthesis. I want to play solo. I want to make ambient music. I want to play in a rock band. I want to sing. So it's kind of just like a matter of like having like 5 different calendars and like totally throwing your ego out the window and like not caring
What like people think about it.
Yeah, I mean I do have a lot of like you know, anxiety about like, well, maybe I should just stick with one thing. And then I think about that for a while. I've, thought about that for a really long time. And I'm like, well, that's like not how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
If I have the drive to like make a rock band, then I'm going to do it because I want to.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's great too because you meet all these people from different communities, and end up just like having like being around a bunch of different types of music, and being like knowing like, oh, like so and so is playing at Sub T and they're gonna play some like cool like psych rock metal stuff, and then like Eris is playing at Elastic and he's gonna play some like crazy jazz shit, like let's go. And like it's really nice being part of like all these different communities, and I really like have a drive to like bring all these people together, and like because Chicago is obviously a great place where people do that a lot, but I had like I sometimes play with this post-punk band called Stuck, and being like, when I was in rehearsal with them, and other rock bands too, it's like sometimes I like playing with like people who just like throw theory out the window, but like are not focused on like it's this chord, it's this note.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like instead it's like it's this progression. It's like time is very loose. And it's just like there are so many musicians who just think about music in totally different, cool ways. Mm-hmm. And it's like I see all these people and I'm just like, let's just like play together and like learn each other's ways of like doing stuff. And like, I don't know, I feel like, because like when I do that, it's like I like see this whole different like side of like thinking about stuff, and like new ideas come from that. And I don't know, yeah.
Like any examples of some new ideas you've had? Because I mean, this like last few weeks I saw you play with Stuck, and then you played with your music with two different groups, and very different, like very composed, improvised music, more in the jazz adjacent world. And last two nights you're playing with like more of a folk singer-songwriter, experimental musician. And so like how like that was like in 2 weeks. Yeah. Literally. You've like done all of that in like 2 weeks. And I'm like, it's very inspiring to me.
Thanks.
And yeah, like what have you kind of like, coming out of that? Like have you had any like new thoughts about like what you want to be doing, or like?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like both influence the other. I feel like years ago I was really in this zone of like making really rigid, like serially composed stuff, which I still like to do, but like I feel like to that there can also, it was like missing like a looseness, and like anything can go anywhere type of vibe. It was like missing that. We were just like so like reading the music and like memorizing the music, and there's like improvisation within that, which is really cool. But I think I've definitely learned through playing with all these different musicians that like something that like is viewed as a mistake, even like say you're playing a show and like you like the group gets off and like you're all in different spots, and it can either be like really chaotic and everyone's like, oh shit, like what's happening, or you can like lean into it and then like all come back together in this really cool way.
Totally.
So yeah, I feel like that is something that's really influencing my composing lately. Is like, how can I write something that can like naturally have that happen in like a good way?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, like a looseness, but there's still like some type of structure, but like space for it to go in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's cool because it seems more reminiscent of life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like not going to be like
Yeah.
overproduced, and it's like or exact or like on a grid. And I think that I feel like it shows like more humanness in the music when there's like space for that, because that's just like it's how like life is too. You know.
Yeah.
And it's like on music, I feel like that's a way for people to kind of like connect to like really any type of music is if it has that element to it. So yeah, that's cool. Like, what are some of the new projects that you're working on?
Well, this, and but you know all about this. A quartet named Thwartet that you are in, that you know about. And yeah, that's definitely one of a group where I'm trying to write music that has this naturalness that also like, you know, shows like, here are my influences and here's what I like, but also we can do whatever we want. What else? A trio that you're also in.
I feel very lucky.
Oh, I feel very lucky that you're in them.
Yeah.
Well, been working on. I've been trying to write music for my first rock band, where I sing and play guitar.
Ooh. What is it called?
It's called Weekend Girl.
Nice.
And yeah, it's always been an avenue that I really wanted to explore. I love singing. The guitar is a crazy instrument. It's so hard, and it's been really fun trying to learn it and play it well. Yeah,
Wow, that's a lot.
that's
Yeah.
it.
And do you feel like when you're composing music, do you have like a time period where you like to do it, or like when it comes to you, or like when you have something like a show coming up and then you're like, I'm gonna write for the show? Like, how does it work? Or are you like in that kind of composing mode, or does it kind of like come and go?
Yeah, I think I definitely have composing modes. I mean, all of this stuff that you heard today came after like a huge rut of no composing at all. And I think I am very like emotionally motivated to write music. Like if something happens,
Yeah.
or if I have like a weird feeling,
Yeah.
or a really happy feeling,
Yeah.
that's when I feel like when I'm more inclined to write music.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you can tell in your music. It's emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, so for your like new groups and your new compositions, and if you're coming from like an emotional place, and it's cool to hear though, like going back to that you're not just writing. I mean, it's okay if you're just writing when it's like sadness or fear, but like you're saying when you're happy too. And sometimes I feel like that can get lost in the process. Like it can be easier to like when you're like happier in a more like positive whatever emotion space, whatever that means. It can be easy to just like keep going, but like you're actually like putting the whole spectrum of feelings into your playing.
I'm trying. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like inspired by like certain like artists or like certain like movies you're seeing or like books you're reading, or is it more like or like nature or more just like human relationships?
I'd say a lot. Recently, I've been so inspired by everybody I've met in Chicago over the past few years. There's a lot of them in the audience right now. And that's like, I don't know, I feel like that's the main motivator when I say like I write music when I'm really happy, is like people. Like I meet all these cool people and I'm like, wow, I wonder if they want to play music with me. And like, here's what I would write if they wanted to play music with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been my main inspiration. Movies?
Or maybe not as much.
No.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, community driven. I feel like it's cool though because you put so much back into the community in Chicago, and then it's like a cycle, you know, and then you get like things out of it. But it just, I mean, it's like my experience of being here in the last year. That's how it has seemed. You know, it's like very regenerative and like cyclical.
Yeah.
And that's
Totally.
like, you know, you put it out there and then you receive. And like I was going to ask you, because you also like you curate some of your own series. So you're like creating spaces for musicians to get together, like the Gather series. And you did Myopic Books.
Yeah. Trying to get that one back up and running soon.
And like what made you want to do those things?
The Gather series specifically, which Izzy right here co-curates with me, I really, like I was kind of talking about before, where like all these different musicians have these different thought processes and like ways that they write and perform. This series is like kind of a project that will hopefully make that come to fruition, because I have the idea is having two sets of music, one maybe like a more experimental or like jazz driven project, and then another like a songwriting or like a rock band or like a hip hop group or something. That will, because I like the idea of like the one band watches something that they may have not ever gone to see in the first place, and then vice versa, and also like bringing the audiences together too. Somebody who's going to like Hannah Francis's show may like not have even heard about like Tyler Wagner's show. And it's like, or vice versa. And it's like, if you are going to something where like you're going to hear something you don't expect, or something maybe you wouldn't have gone to in the first place, like maybe all of a sudden like you're like, wow, I love this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like the idea behind that series, is to get people thinking, get people out seeing music that they maybe wouldn't have heard otherwise.
Yeah, no, and that seems like it's doing a great job with that. I think that's really important, because that's the only way like people can get exposed to new things, if it feels like accessible and safe and supportive, but then they also like are pushing their comfort zones at the same time. Like you need both to be happening. And then I think that's, and I think that it's cool to see, like I feel like already like the communities of different music, you know, it's feeling more fluid, you know. So I appreciate you doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all for today. Thanks for coming out. Yay.